Howdy mates, good afternoon. Here's a second video today. I'm over at a separate preserve. I'm over at the Oscar Scherer State Park, which I've done quite a few videos here before. However, this is going to focus upon a slightly different topic. So, I noticed as I was walking through along this bench here to take a little break, I noticed I stumbled upon some particular wildflowers that are native to Florida. So, one of them right here in front of me, this is the partridge pea. I have done a video on that particular plant. So, it's about a month or so old. But, another plant that I did find is this one. This is known as the Camphorweed. Now, this is actually a native shrub found in Florida, and typically it starts flowering in early spring, so you figure probably April or May, and then it'll continue to flower until it hits around the fall. So you could say it's somewhat in the middle or the later third of its life. And this is both an annual and a biennial, depending on the particular environment that it's in. Now, these particular plants are a bit picky about what type of soil they want. They typically like to remain on sand that is very well drained, which makes sense considering that we're basically in the mesic pine flatwoods, essentially, that's ahead of us. But you may be wondering too, why do they call it camphorweed? Well, what's actually neat about the plant is if you pick up a leaf and you disturb it by grinding it with your fingers, you'll notice it has a bit of a strong odor. Nothing bad, just kind of reminds you of smelling mint, as an example. But they call that the camphor, and hence that's what gives it the name. Now, speaking for the plant, it actually does have quite a few useful medicinal practices. For one thing, camphorweed is really useful, especially along the leaves and the roots. It's especially useful for helping to treat inflammation, from a cut or a wound, you name it. This plant actually helps treat that inflammation, that reaction that your body takes whenever you have any kind of cut. This plant is actually very useful for that. You can mix it with some water, and it creates sort of that medicinal use for the plant. But then, another way to really identify the plant too is they kind of look a bit similar to dandelions, especially from back up in Ohio, but the flower heads are a lot smaller, and typically too kind of remind you of sort of looking at a cup, below the flower. And yeah, usually too, along the stem and the leaves, it kind of has a sandpaper texture as well. And does it really hurt? If you touch the stem or the leaves? No, not at all. It just has a much rougher texture with little hairs on them. So generally, it's actually quite harmless when in fact it's actually a bit useful and helpful for us. But that is the camphorweed. But then moving on, we've got ourselves right here, from what I've been able to identify, it's called the Chapman's Blazing Star. Now, the Chapman's Blazing Star is another native shrub, or should I say flower, that is found in Florida. Now, typically it will have like the same flowering period as the camphorweed. It'll start flowering as early as even April. It's actually one of the earliest to flower. And it will eventually wind up dying and becoming deciduous as it approaches into October or so. Yes, so this is indeed deciduous. It will eventually lose its flowers. So I'm thinking that this is actually a perennial. As a matter of fact, they do come back every year. Now, why do you think they call it Blazing Star? Well, actually, if you go towards the top here, you'll see that the flowers sort of remind you of having a shape of a star. And that's how it really gets its name. And yeah, it reminds you of looking at like a underwater type of plant, like seaweed. But rest assured it isn't. These are very well adapted to well-drained sandy soil. And what's cool is majority of this stalk is flowering, but you'll see more of the colored flowers towards the top, of course. And generally, they can reach up to, well, in this case, it's actually near my waist. So you figure about 3 or so feet. But yeah, typically they do occur in clusters, as you can see. I mean, there's a group of others there, and even to my left, and even straight in front of me as well. But yes, they are typically in groups. Now, from what I've read, for medicinal use, apparently has been useful for treating headaches and fevers. But other than that, there doesn't really seem to be much shedded light on what else the plant can provide, medicinally speaking. The same thing goes for its edibility, if it's really edible or not. But regardless, this is indeed a native plant in Florida, the Chapman's Blazing Star. But yeah, here it talks a bit about the Scrubby Flatwoods. So yeah, you can see it has a wide range of years of how often burns or prescribed burns happen. But yeah, this is actually along the Yellow Trail at the Oscar Scherer State Park. You could either take the 5-mile route or the 3.5. Me personally, I think I'm going to do the 3.5 mile, as this time of the day it gets a bit toasty. So just have to be vigilant, But yeah, you can see there are quite a bit of snags. Those are basically dead trees that were once alive. And oftentimes snags are important for nesting opportunity, especially among osprey and bald eagles. Those are like the more prevalent birds in this area. But needless to say, it could also be used by northern mockingbirds or even Florida scrub jays. Just really depends. But yeah, Scrubby Flatwoods, that's the primary habitat found in this state park. So you figure what I'm standing on, this was once joined at a beach, met right up with the water. But over time, as land moves, sea level changes, the topography can change, as well as what the flora of the given land is going to be. It changes. But you could say that we are still considered to be in a coastal scrubby flatwood. But yeah. So, alrighty. That's all I have for you guys at the moment. Hope you learned something out of the video. Forgive me for the length, but I was covering 2 separate plants and a little bit about the habitat too. Thanks for watching, and once again, learning on a journey is outwards. Take care, folks.